Well, I do want to welcome everybody back that has been with us for these. I think we're on, is this week 4 of our series on why is church so hard? And for those of you that just tuning in, watching this on YouTube, we have been having great just conversations with experts from the Center for Career and Ministry Development, just talking about some of the challenges and trying to provide just a few nuggets of how we can encounter and deal with the fact that church is challenging, maybe more challenging than we expected, or more challenging than it was. But in any case, we're so glad to have Reverend Sandra here with us today. Let me read off why she is amazing. So, Reverend Sandra is a ministry coach and a retreat facilitator. She's ordained in the American Baptist Churches USA. She is bilingual in English and French and has lived in countries from Africa and Europe as well as North America. And so she brings a cross-cultural sensitive approach to clients and organizations. She has an MA in pastoral ministry from Boston College, an MS in rehabilitation counseling and psychology from Boston University, 35 years in human services counseling, disability advocacy, group retreat facilities, pastorate, national and international ministry engagements, as well as doing one-to-one mentoring to the ministry coaching practice. She is a published author of devotional books. In English, it's Beacon of Hope, Walking of Generosity, and in Spanish, I'm not going to try to say it, but it is Beacon of Hope. And so, Reverend Sandra brings just a wealth of experience to the conversation that we are having today, which is about self-care. Yeah, and as I was talking to you, I was getting ready for this. One of the things that I was just aware of is that people start in very different places, different ministers around just the idea of self-care. I know in my context, I'm saturated with the idea, I should do self-care. But in a lot of contexts, that's not at all the expectation. In fact, there is a taboo with the idea that a minister might need support, might need help. Churches might feel like, that it's not that the minister's job isn't to do that. And so, as we're having this conversation, I thought maybe we'd start just kind of at the beginning that if you are in a context, a setting that says, you know, self-care isn't that just selfish? And shouldn't we be about the people that we are serving? What would you say to people who are in that context and experiencing those pressures?
Thank you. Thank you for the putting that context and thank you for having me. Yeah, self-care, if we can change the wording around and caring for self as an entree, as really the entry point might be helpful for contexts where it is foreign for the congregation. It is foreign for folks in the pews and the expectations. And also, we have to be mindful of cultural expectations where a pastor is really 24/7 expected to be on call 24/7, 7 days a week. The whole concept of Sabbath or taking time off or pausing is really foreign or, less than in other contexts. So that's really part of the dilemma or the challenge, I would say, for congregational settings where pastors feel that, they're kind of going up Mount Everest as far as self-care and trying to promote that, trying to even bring it in conversation where, we've seen pastors really having difficulties and they're really having a hard time. So looking at synonyms, looking at the care for self, which folks may understand the care maybe even giving example like, um, people go and have their annual physical. Well, the pastor is also has to have annual physical, has to have, those type of physical, attending to those physical needs. And so that's a beginning because, as we know, self-care encompasses not just the physical piece, but the emotional and the spiritual. So, yeah, it can be a taboo topic, but I think, we need to burst that bubble. So I'm happy to burst that bubble with you and with our colleagues at CCDM.
Yeah, so you would say that no matter the cultural expectation,
Mhm.
especially maybe in this time, but maybe all times,
Yeah,
the pastor, caring for self,
yeah.
um, is just an essential thing.
It is essential. And I think let's not forget that Jesus modeled that Jesus cared for self. Jesus retreated. Jesus paused in the ministry. And the ministry, 2000 years ago, was even more challenging than we are seeing. So if Jesus paused and we are Christ followers, let's pause as well. And
Yeah, that's
it might start with just a day a week. I mean, however the context for pastors allows for that pausing conversation to happen and actualizing the pausing, absolutely.
yeah. Now there are also people I think that are yeah, I guess a couple more people I want to speak to. One is a group of people who are like, you know, um, I just need to bring it to prayer.
Mm,
Like
mm,
that, that's the goal. So, I hear self-care and what I hear is sort of non-spiritual sort of, therapeutic things rather than giving over my burdens to God. And
yeah.
then the second group, I'll put two out and you can deal with them. Then the other is just the one that's like, you know what, I'm with you. Self
Mm,
care would be amazing. I
mhm,
have no time. I'm a bivocational pastor, or
mhm,
I'm taking care of nieces and nephews, or
mhm.
I'm the solo pastor that has so much to do. So yes, self care, but no, I can't do it.
Yeah, no. And the two contexts, thank you for those two examples because those two are really critical and important. Not, one is not more um, on the priority level than the other. They are two absolutely the need and the response for self-care is absolutely important. And I would say the bivocational who's solo pastor, I can resonate to that because that was part of my call. I was back in the days working in an academic setting as well as bivocational. I was part-time as a pastor and following a full-time pastorate. So the expectations were even higher. And what helped me, and I hope it will help some of our bivocational colleagues, is to bring data, to bring, these are the number of hours I've been called for. When I'm called to do this or that, this adds to, and there's no more, no more out of the cup or no more to give. So something else has to give. And, there are roles in our congregations that call for to step up to do other things. But in order to continue to serve well, which is what we are asked to do, what we're called to do as pastors and our ministers of the word, is to do it well, to do it with compassion, to do it with love, to give of our best. And when we are feeling frustrated or that we serve and we notice resentment starting to build up and all that, then that's even more of the need to pause, the need to ask for help. And there's no shame in asking for help. There is absolutely no shame about that. Um, and the first context, the first example that you gave, as far as there's no time, there is time. I mean, we need to make time, and time needs to be a priority for, again, that care for self. We don't need to wait for a crisis to happen because it will come to that, or it might even come to unhealthy behaviors to start creeping in, and then when pastors are not serving from the overflow, are not serving from really the goodness, and there's more harm being done. So we want to avoid the harm. We want to avoid the harm for self, but also for the congregation and the people we're called to accompany. So,
Yeah. So something you might be saying is taking the time to care for yourself oftentimes is more helpful for the congregation
mm,
than kind of pushing through, building
mhm,
resentment, or even just being so tired or lacking that motivation that you are having trouble getting things done.
correct. And so often, I think our colleagues also, serve and they are physically ill, physically just stumbling and having difficulty. I mean, yeah, and we need to pay attention to our bodies. I mean, we are God's temple. But again, the serving from the love and from compassion is the priority. I think with that, the reality that church and being shepherd of congregations is hard,
Yeah,
has always been hard. And
yeah,
in these contexts and these global, divisiveness that we are facing, it's even more critical that our colleagues and pastors, pay attention to their body psychologically, emotionally, spiritually as well. So,
yeah. And
yeah.
Laura, I saw your hand there. You're welcome to put a question in the chat. We will also have a time after after the conversation for people to ask follow-up questions, but I keep the chat open so I can bring the question forward during this time if it's a now question, or you can ask it um, at the end of the conversation. Um, so yeah, so you were getting at this idea of listening to our bodies,
Hmm.
and that being sort of how we know that we need self-care.
Correct.
So
Correct.
what does that look like? How do we listen to our bodies?
What a wonderful question. For those who have been part of some of my workshops and all, I do a lot of breath work. Um, and and I've even, published an article on take a breath. We have to relearn or learn to breathe
Mm,
and breathe fully. Breathe, filling our lungs. So listening to our bodies is really listening to the aches and pains that we have, but also the joys. I would say, when was the last time that we had belly laughs or that, pastors, whether pastors who are just starting their pastorate or have been serving for 20 plus years, when was the last time they had joy and had fun
yeah.
and
That's a
just,
skill you don't learn in seminary, how to belly laugh.
I know, huh? I'll be happy to teach that class. But it is so important. And it's from head to toe. For our women pastors who are in the clergy, when was the last time you had a massage or a manicure or went to the beauty parlor and, had your scalp massage? That's paying attention to your body. Um, Going on retreat, even there are retreats and retreat centers and programs that offer just embodiment, so just the scanning of the body and that type of thing, and just the contemplative practices of paying attention to ourselves, paying attention to the aches and pains and the joys. And that's where it starts. And if there are aches and pains, asking for help. There is no shame in asking for help. We're actually modeling for the congregation how it
Yeah,
is
so
to
that's
ask for
part of
help.
why there's not shame, is that we would never say to a congregant, "Why'd you come from help for help? You're
Mhm.
supposed to be strong enough. You know the verse. You can do all things through Christ. Why did you come to me?"
We're not the doctor, the MD, or and prayer is absolute prayer, centered in prayer and centered in God. Yes, I'm not saying that it's either or, but what I am really saying is to pay attention, yeah, to the body. The body tells us, which is, it's our thermometer. Um, and so often, when people have a cold or have the flu, we encourage them to stay home. We encourage them to go and visit a doctor. We people in the pews and our colleagues, we need to encourage each other. Stay home. Go see a doctor. Don't come sneezing all over the place in the sanctuary. So it's a self-care, but it's a healthy boundary. Um,
Yeah. When you work with pastors that
mhm,
and you guys are working on self-care,
yeah.
what are the biggest barriers that you see to self-care, and what are some of the things that you help coach them around to being able to create that space for self-care?
Sure, a great question. Thank you, Nick. I think one of the biggest barriers is culturally having, um, whether it's immigrant pastors or Black or brown pastors coming for help and knowing just the association that there's no shame with it. And then once that threshold has been crossed, the relief that we're able to unpack and to accompany the pastor and the questions. As you know, coaching is about accompanying and addressing, the curious questions and unpacking the best out of it. But yeah, crossing that barrier, that cultural barrier
Yeah.
is huge.
Step one is what cultural barrier, but it could be the shame is something we all bear at
Mhm,
times,
mhm,
right? And so crossing over that sense of shame, whether comes from our culture or just comes from our family of origin
correct,
or our
correct,
insides, that sense of like I'm supposed to be able to do this.
correct.
Maybe the idea that every other pastor is okay.
Yes, yeah, and the pressure, the external pressures as well. The expectations, internal expectations that yes, I'm responding to God's call, and I should be able to do it all. The shoulds, as you hear in what I'm saying, but also those external expectations that our pastors carry. It's huge, and feeling like if they approach, their pastoral relations committee or um, whomever, the elders, depending on their setting, and saying that they need rest. The the assumptions that are going to be made that if they need rest, does that mean they're leaving? Does that mean, they might be thinking the worst, versus no, it's the rest is needed, the rest is now. And it's also modeling and teaching that ongoing rest. So having a schedule, a vacation schedule, having, continuing education schedule that is part of the system and part of the journey of accompanying congregations along the way. And there's never too much of rest. I recognize that our pastors are dealing with a lot these days. So just sitting with God and taking time to sit, just to sit, not to prepare sermons, but just to sit and refill the cup is huge.
Yeah, and something you said there, and you had said this when we were talking earlier, preparing for this, was having the conversation,
Hmm.
right? That,
Yeah.
once we get past that internal sense of shame or that imposter syndrome or all the barriers to seeking help,
Mm,
the next step is to let people know.
yes.
Like, let
Yes.
someone know whether or not it's your church or get a coach or a spiritual director. But like, a lot of times people like, I I can't do self-care. And it's like, who have you invited in? Right. I think that's
Correct.
something you said a lot
Correct.
about is
Yes.
uh,
Yes. Who's
seek
part
the
of your
resources.
supportive village? And for some, it might be the first time even understanding that concept. But, as in seminary, we have professors that, they have affinities, but having a therapist is okay. I think we need to normalize, and by our clients coming and knocking at our door of CCDM, there is a sense of normalizing that asking for help and having somebody to accompany, whether it be a coach or a vocational counselor, psychologist, is okay. It's not reducing who we are, but actually elevating because we are putting it as a priority, and our families are benefiting from taking better care of ourselves. It reminds me of, and I often use that and quote it too, of, Dr. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. In order to really reach our potential and the ultimate purpose, we need to start at the basic, and that's the basic needs, the physiological needs. That is important. Yeah.
Yeah, and so figuring out where the helpers are,
Yes. Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
then and that may be getting external support, and maybe having that first conversation
Hmm.
with your church about sort of what are the rhythms that will
Hmm.
help you be the best pastor for them.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um,
Does
yeah.
that go well? Like when you as you're coaching the people you're serving and they've gotten over their sense of shame, but maybe they're in a culture that they really feel the expectation that it's not okay for them to
Hmm.
seek help. What's their experience when they do go to their council or their pastoral relation team or whatever form that it goes to?
Yeah. There's a sense of liberation because, in the coaching styles and the coaching theory and practices is really helping to the client unpack what is already there, and the gifts and the strengths. So it's knowing how to find your voice. And it might be at times that we need to do some role playing, but it's how to find their voice. It's affirming their voice,
Mm.
themselves. And so it starts, baby steps, but there is definitely that sense of breathing, of being liberated, of there's an elephant on the table that has not been spoken about, and finally being able to talk about it and address it, and normalizing and giving examples, everyday examples, and that are good for the context that they're in, and then it continues. I mean, it really is. Um, once they get on that train and see that, yeah, they can get on that train. It's really amazing to see transformation and how, with the help of the Holy Spirit, they keep on going, and they say, okay, now I release you now from your coaching duties, and I can take it from there, which is beautiful.
Yeah, I love that idea of, of liberation, that
Hmm.
regardless of how the church responds to it,
Hmm.
you know, taking that weight,
Hmm.
of just knowing that you don't have what you need and
Yeah.
speaking it, having voice.
Yeah.
It sounds like regardless of how the church responds, although
Yeah.
oftentimes it responds well, um, there's a liberation that is
Yes.
a worth it, where you just
Absolutely.
get it off your weight yourself.
Absolutely. It's kind of, as an image that comes to mind is like, we see sometimes some children at the edge of a pond, and, the hesitation to put the toe in the water and then to find out that, oh, it's not that cold after all. And they plunge in. So, with our support and the accompaniment, and that they're not alone. I think that's the biggest hurdle, that our colleagues are not alone in this process.
So if people, I mean, you talk a lot about breathing, right,
Hmm.
and about
Hmm.
rest.
Yep.
Breathing we can do. Rest feels like it's hard to schedule in. Are there things that you have found have just helped pastors be able to figure out how to add rest to their rhythms?
Sure. And, step one can be looking at their own schedule. What's a 24-hour schedule looks like, knowing that you want to put in whatever amount it is to sleep, because we do need to sleep, and that's rest. It might be disturbed rest at times, but, looking at nutrition, um, how that impacts, as well. What is the routine? What are the rhythms? Truly, the daily rhythms and the rhythms leading up to nightly rest. But when we take a look and assess a 24-hour schedule themselves, they see that they can put in rest. It speaks, I mean, it jumps on the page. So from a day, then to look at a week, and then to look at a month, and to add, several months, and in small chunks. But the concreteness of such an exercise is really helpful. I tend to also invite, if clients are comfortable, to add color, and see if, they want to put in the rest pause in their schedule in a color that they associate with as restful, and
Hmm.
see how that just populates the schedule and speaks to them. And
Yeah,
puts it maybe on the fridge as a family calendar, and see what happens. Yeah.
yeah, I can imagine like seeing that space of
Mhm.
rest on your
Mhm.
calendar, how that could be a nice thing when you are
Correct.
feeling in it the rest of the week and
Yeah.
feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure then from that, serving in congregations, the congregation itself will notice that there is a transformation happening. And it's okay to juxtapose it, to bring it. We have rhythms in our liturgical year, and so how do we approach it as a congregation as well? So
Yeah.
yeah.
I tell pastors, having a regular time of rest where you are largely unavailable, it's good for
Mhm.
you, but it's also good for the congregation. It
Yeah.
lowers their anxiety as a system because
Hmm.
they realize, oh, we can be okay
Yeah.
without our pastor for a short period of time.
Correct.
And so it's actually not just good for the minister, but it also helps um, systems feel that they are strong enough, and it empowers
Absolutely.
them.
Absolutely. And, in one of the resources that I shared with you is there's a really great article by Dr. James Ellis where he speaks of workaholism,
Mm.
the extreme, and what it is. It's not good. It's not a good cup to drink, and the importance of not getting to there and the damage that it does as well. So that's an important piece to look at and to face.
So how do we know
Mhm.
that the pastoring, the ministry we're doing is an ism rather than just being, we have the calling,
Mhm.
oftentimes we have this sense, and it feels like we're just prioritizing God, right?
Mm,
So, what's the difference? How do we know between, giving, surrendering and sacrifice
mm,
and an ism?
mm. That's a beautiful question. That is a beautiful question. Um, I think for me, as I hear it, and I would say encourage our colleagues to really look at and know that we cannot do it all. And that's the beginning of the chapter on ism, to
Mm,
acknowledge and accept we cannot do it all. We're not Jesus.
mm,
But we have our specialties and we have our lane and what we're good at. And, in seminary, we've also been taught, yes, we can begin conversations around pastoral counseling, but it's important to also refer outside. So to have that Rolodex, so to have the names where, whether it's a couple who's coming for pastoral counseling or, individuals, but to be able to refer out. Again, we are not to not feed into that ism and not feed into building the ego. It's really more damage for self and for the congregation, because then they will expect that's all they'll know and expect. And any other pastors that they'll call after, then they will be expecting that, yeah, this is how so and so did it, and so before that, and all that. So,
yeah.
yeah, no, it's a
So,
danger.
so one sign that you're in the ism is when you, if you take that moment to breathe, you're like, I feel like it is my job to do it all.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's because you feel it externally that
Mm-hmm.
the church like will fall apart
Yeah.
if you don't, or if it's internal, I need to do it all so I get the credit or so that I feel like I'm a good pastor. But
Mm-hmm.
when you take that breath and you see that you're at the center of the reason,
Mm-hmm.
that's a sign of an ism in ministry.
Absolutely.
Are
And
there others?
it's a
Other signs?
dangerous sign. Um, and it's a beautiful example of where even more the value of taking stock of why. Um, what is the why is it, and the negativity that it will be bringing in as well in the congregation, the unhealthy um, um, climate and dynamics that it will present as well. Um, I think the other piece that I would say is um, paying attention to Sabbath, paying attention to continuing education. We need to be continuing to, educate ourselves and learn and stay away from the competitiveness that we have. Well, so and so in such a state and all has thousands of people in their pews, and that comparison that we have. Well, you've been called, God's called you to this particular setting, and whether it be 20 people or 5,000, the needs are different, but staying God-centered and the call and the why we are doing the ministry that we're doing needs to stay centered.
Yeah, I think that's a important, like, even if we can't live there, right?
Mm,
Like, I think, many people, living up to the Joneses effect is real everywhere.
yeah,
But
yeah,
an act of self-care can be spending intentional time being centered in God's call, being sort of present with where you are and what God is doing through you in however tiny or big of
yeah,
a space you're in, can be a real, takes no time other
yeah,
than just intention, and can
correct.
really give you a break and recenter yourself. And it's
Hmm.
it's kind of a different form of breathing. It's like a mental breath.
Yeah, absolutely. And then recognizing the skills and talents that you bring for that context,
Mm.
um, for that season, that time. So, uh,
Yeah, because
yeah,
that's a way to care for self, is to remind yourself that you bring assets, that you are
yes.
called, gifted, and capable, even when it feels like it's a challenge.
Hmm.
Which
And it is a challenge. I mean, there's no, there's no context, there's no pastorate that is just perfect,
yeah,
or whatever perfect is. I mean, that's the other piece, but it's
yeah,
how do we navigate the rhythms of challenges and the ups and the downs, but the joy of transformation with the Holy Spirit and seeing how Holy Spirit just touches lives and brings people to faith and even deepen their faith. And we see other calls coming, and that's beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful. Yeah.
yeah. No, that's part of why I wanted to do this series, was
Hmm.
because, I think, churches have amazingly gifted, called, and better trained than ever ministers.
Yeah.
Uh, but church is really hard right now.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
why we need to have these conversations, because it's not about us.
Yeah. No.
And that lie that says, another pastor would do this better,
Correct.
is just
Correct.
so super defeating, when really, lots of people everywhere are experiencing, I don't have all that I need.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and that's why it's important to ask for help,
Yeah. And
because
also to
we're all
reckon, I
feeling it.
think this series is so important, just even acknowledging that yes, it is difficult.
Yeah.
And that's the step one. And seeing and helping, our colleagues and pastors seeing, okay, so what do you have? I mean, God has gifted you. What are your spiritual gifts? What do you have? And how do we accompany, unpack that, remember, and reacquaint them with the joys?
Mm.
Again, we go back to where we started of that belly laugh. When was the last time you put aside the pastor's hat and had a belly laugh, had a time just for self? I mean, Jesus enjoyed the children and enjoyed everybody. Jesus enjoyed parties. But the meandering of it's not linear, it really speaks to the gifts that we have and that we often forget that we have.
Yeah, no, I think that was a picture you had said when we were preparing, that I thought was that pastor's hat, and I was thinking just how heavy
Hmm.
that hat is, and of course
Hmm.
we choose to put it on,
Hmm.
but if we don't take it off,
Hmm.
right, that's a weight, that's maybe a sign of an ism in our
Hmm.
ministry,
Yeah.
and just that ability to have a break. You know, I was a
Right.
hiker, and when I could put my pack down for a moment,
Mm-hmm.
like that was rest.
Yeah, absolutely. And to identify and note when it is difficult to take it off, or when do we choose to take it off or not to take it off. And at times, our spouses or partners are the ones to say, hey, it's been a while now.
Mm.
I want my husband or I want my wife. I don't want the pastor talking to me. And that can be the wake up call for some of our colleagues. So,
Yeah, so I want to bring this to an end in part because I know that self-care is something that they're really a little individualized, and so I
mhm,
actually want to give and encourage our participants or to what questions they have, and it might
sure,
and give permission for it to be even particular to them. You know,
sure.
sometimes I don't like to ask questions that are about me, but in self care, we have Sandra here to answer questions, and so I'm going to turn the record button off and then invite whoever has any questions at all. I just want to have enough time for that.
And
Yeah,
to
go
also put the resource
Oh,
page.
yes, I was going to do that. Thank you. And I'm going to do that before I turn the recording off so that those people watching this. All right. Can
Yeah.
Sandra, you can see this? All
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
So we're going to give just 2 minutes for everyone if you want to write down any of these websites or just write down the beginning of it, and then you can Google it. Um, but give people a chance to do that.
And even a screenshot if they want to.
And screenshot, yes, thank you.
Sure.
Or grab your cell phone and take a picture of it. All right.